Hi everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. I know, sorry, we're a few minutes late starting, but good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to BrightGen's Spring 16 webinar. In a moment, I'll be handing over to our very own CTO and Salesforce guru, Mr. Keir Bowden, aka Bob Buzzard, for those who follow Keir's blogs. Keir will go through the key highlights then of the release. If you have any questions during the webinar, send them to me using the chat facility within the webinar. I'll collate these, and there'll be a Q&A session at the end where Keir will endeavour to provide all the answers that you need. If we just go through the agenda very briefly, Keir's going to be talking about the new custom object work orders, and then improvements around the other features, particularly around Lightning Experience and the other features that are listed there. So without further ado, let's get to the man himself, Mr. Keir Bowden.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that line, Clive. So moving on now to the topic of this webinar, the Spring 16 release of Salesforce. So a slightly smaller set of release notes this time around, just the 390 pages to peruse through, and quite a lot that I think is going to be of interest to our customers as well. So first up is a new custom object, which is work orders. So work orders, they require the Service Cloud license, and they basically represent assignments to carry out work on your customer's products. So typically the sort of thing that you'd assign to field service personnel. So example use cases are ad hoc repairs, planned preventative maintenance type of jobs. So up until now, and we've done a few of these, both from an internal IP perspective and for customers, and we've typically used cases, repurposed a case record type, or we've created custom objects to allow us to do this. So now this is supported natively on the platform. At the moment, it's very much just a recording type of thing, but I'm sure there'll be more coming along with that. So work orders can be associated with a number of S object types, which are listed there, including other work orders. And this allows you to tie the work order back to the underlying record with as much granularity as you've got. So if you do have a service contract, then you can tie the work order back to that particular service contract if it's on a particular asset. However, if all you have is the account details and anyone can phone up and have some work done, then you can tie it back to that, whatever is appropriate. And work orders also support line items, which allows you to identify the individual tasks required to complete the work, and then field service personnel can mark each task as complete as they progress through the work. So very much the kind of workflow with a checklist of things to be done. So next up we have the Lightning Experience. So the first thing I wanted to do was recap what the Lightning Experience is, because it's been around for a release now, but I know that obviously not everybody's upgraded to it, because the original Winter 16 release was very much had a sales focus, and also there are some things you can't do, so not everyone's going to pick that up. So put simply, the Lightning Experience is a brand new user interface for Salesforce. It doesn't have feature parity with the existing UI, although that has improved in this release. But it might not be something that you want to start using right away. I've just been asked to make the PowerPoint full screen. I'm going to give that a shot to make it as wide as I can. Still need to get to the GoToWebinar information, but I mean, you should be able to, on a GoToWebinar client, you should be able to zoom as well. There's to the top left, there's webcams and Zoom, and it will default to something around 80%, but you can make it bigger than that. So that's hopefully big enough. So sorry, back to where we were. So Winter 16 was very much a sales focus for the Lightning Experience. Spring 16 builds on this, so it's still got quite a sales focus, but it introduces some service capability as well. So this UI is completely rebuilt from scratch using Lightning components, which is the Salesforce JavaScript framework for building kind of next generation UI components. The existing UI has been renamed Classic. So when you look at the documentation, you'll see references to things being available for Lightning Experience or Salesforce Classic. And where we can clearly identify things in that way, we've done the same thing here. So, as you might expect, the Lightning Experience requires you to use a modern browser, and here are the currently supported versions. I'm not going to walk you through all of those, but basically, if you're not on one of those browsers, on a lot of sites, if you're not on a supported browser, it will give you a slightly reduced experience, something known as progressive enhancement. What happens with the Lightning Experience, if it can't detect a browser of that nature, it will redirect you back to the classic site, so back to the traditional Salesforce UI. So on to the new features for the Lightning experience in Spring 16. So the first one we have is person accounts. So these are now supported, but in this release they're in beta. For those, I say this every time, but I'm sure there's got some new people on this webinar. For those that aren't familiar with what this means in the Salesforce world, it isn't like old style beta that might disappear at any time. Instead, beta means in Salesforce the functionality is production quality, but with some known limitations, and it should go into GA within 3 releases. So here's a few of the limitations on person accounts in the Lightning experience. So the configuration for person accounts isn't accessible via the Lightning setup. So you have to flip back to Classic, which you can easily do by clicking your user icon at the top right of the screen and then choosing to switch to Classic or switch to the Lightning experience. So secondly, person accounts will be included in all account and contact lookups, even when it's not applicable. So what I mean there is, for example, the account lookup field on a contact record includes person accounts, even though a person account can't own contacts in that nature. So what will happen is you'll try and use it, and then you'll get an error from that. Also, business account quick actions will appear on a person account record page, even though not all quick actions are valid for a person account. For example, the create contact quick action. And finally, when creating a case, the contact field will not be populated when a person account is selected as the account until such time as you save the record. So the UI won't update in real time. You'll save the record, and once that record is saved, then it will tie those 2 items together. Excuse me. Next, we have campaigns. So like person accounts, these are also in beta for the Spring 16 release. So the limitations for campaigns are that you can't add members from a list view. You have to switch to Salesforce Classic in order to do that. But you can add them from an account or lead record detail page, and you can also load them via the data import wizard. Campaign influence isn't yet supported in Lightning Experience. You can't clone campaign members, and you can't access campaign results across hierarchies. So when you access a campaign record, the campaign members related list is initially displayed as a donut chart, which we think is quite a nice feature. But if you want to see the details, you want to see the full list of people who are in this campaign, you simply click the view all link down the bottom left, and this then displays full details of the list of members in that particular campaign. You can see the campaign membership for your leads and contacts on the record homepage. So the top left screen grab here shows the campaign membership for a contact, which appears in the related section of the page in the center panel in one of the tabs, while the bottom right shows the campaign membership for a lead, which appears on the right-hand sort of sidebar side of the page underneath any social information if you have that turned on and you have a connection to the lead. Opportunity teams are now supported in the Lightning experience, so the team information just appears at the bottom right of an opportunity record page, as shown here with a red box around it. So a new feature that we're really pleased about, because we use the Lightning experience and it's something that we've missed a bit, is custom list view support. So in Winter 16, there's predefined list views, and that's all you're allowed to see. Whereas in Spring 16, you can create a new custom list view yourself. So on the page containing the list view that you're currently using, there's a gear icon to the right of the list view name, and then if you click on that and select the new option from the resulting menu, this opens the new list view dialog. So here you supply the view name and define who has access to it, much like you would when creating a list view in Classic. Once you've created the list view, you can click the gear icon again and select the fields that you want to display. So you have to do this at 2 steps at the moment. Hopefully that'll get a bit slicker going forward. And finally, you choose the fields that you want in your list view, and you save that, and then that list will appear in the drop down of the available list views. Okay, another great new feature is the ability to create a custom navigation menu. So you do this from the setup wizard. So you go into the setup menu, and then you select the navigation menus option, and this will open you the new menus wizard, where you give it the name, you develop a name and a description. Again, something very common for those of us that have been using Salesforce for a while. So once you've done that, you then select the items to appear on your menu from the available items list. So you very much just click on it and drag it across to the left or the right, depending on whether you add the item in or whether you're removing it and putting it back in the list of available. And then finally, you choose which profiles this menu apply to. And then when a user with that profile next logs in, or if they're already logged in when they next refresh the page, they'll see the new menu item, which in my case, because I've only put 3 items on it, I've got accounts, campaigns, and contacts, and that's all they'll see. So these are the items that the custom navigation menu supports in the Spring 16 release. So all custom and most standard objects. One thing to note is that if a standard object isn't supported in the Lightning experience, it'll open in a new tab in Salesforce Classic. It won't open in Lightning experience unless there is support for it. You can put custom apps into the menu, Visualforce tabs, Lightning component tabs, which I'm well aware probably not many people have used yet, but a Lightning component tab is essentially a tab that wraps a Lightning component like you might wrap a Visualforce page. Web tabs, which have been around for ages, but not connected apps. Connected apps are slightly different, and they don't really support that UI in this way. So custom navigation menus respect user permissions. So for example, if your profile doesn't allow you access to opportunities, then you won't see that option even if it has been added to your menu. So it doesn't give you any way of shortcutting the standard Salesforce security. You can change the configuration and revert back to the default menu at any point in time. So by creating a custom menu, you haven't lost the default menu, it's still there. You can just change the profile assignment and set someone back to the default menu. So each profile is only allowed one menu, like most things in Salesforce, profile specific, but you can share the same menu across multiple profiles. So if you've got a group of users that need the same custom menu, you only define that once and then you add that to all of their profiles. You can define up to 10 menus per org, limits 5 for professional. I'm not sure, I don't think any of our customers are using professional. We might have some attendees who are still using that. Each menu can contain up to 100 items, but I would be very wary of going anywhere near that limit because your users aren't going to thank you if they're spending all their time scrolling up and down quite a deep menu. So I would be looking to, if you need to do something like that, maybe having a menu item that then opens another page that allows you to kind of go down nested levels of navigation or something along those lines. Okay, another Lightning component, Lightning experience feature, you can now filter the activity timeline. So here's an example timeline containing a number of different activities, tasks, events, calls. So clicking the All Activities drop-down allows you to select a specific activity type to display. So in this case, I've selected tasks. And then once I click onto tasks, then the filter is updated and it only shows me activities of the selected type. So everything else is filtered out. I can easily go back just by clicking in the drop down and selecting all activities again. And the Lightning experience now supports inline editing, but it's a little bit different to the way that you'll be used to using inline editing in Salesforce Classic. So anything that's editable will have a small pencil icon next to it, which we've just highlighted in red. So when you click that, what it'll do is rather than just enabling that particular field for editing, it'll open the entire record for editing in a dialog. So if you need to make multiple changes, you don't have to bounce around and double click on 3 or 4 fields. You can change everything in one particular go. And also a nice little feature on this, if you've done some edits through this mechanism and then you try and navigate away from the page, you'll get a little warning dialog that tells you you've got unsaved changes. Are you sure you want to move away from them and lose them? So there's also been some changes to the calendar in Lightning Experience. So once you open the calendar from the sidebar, clicking in a time slot, so here we've got 9 AM on April the 15th at the moment, this opens the event dialog to inline as a pop-up to allow you to easily create an event. So if you're a Google Apps user, then this will be really familiar from the way that the Google Calendar works, something again that we're quite liking having used it recently. Next up, we have the Email Composer pop-out. So if you click on the email button in the activity tab on a record, that allows you to compose an email. But down the bottom to the left of the send button, as I've just highlighted in red there, there's a new pop-out button. And what this does is this opens the email composer in its own layer. Again, a bit like when if you're a Google Mail user, when you create a new email, it doesn't flip you to a new page or anything like that. It just pops it up as a little layer of its own. A nice feature of this is once this is open, this pop-out remains in the foreground even if you navigate away from the page where you've opened it. So in this case, I've opened the pop-up in an opportunity record page. if I then go to the home page, as you can see, the background changes, but my email is still where it was. And so anything that I've entered into that email isn't lost because I've navigated to a new page, and that still remains there in the foreground. And as you can see, still related to the correct record that I opened the email composer from. So next up, we have global actions. So these are actions that you can take from the header bar of the Lightning Experience page and are accessed via the new plus icon, which sits on the left-hand side of the top right of the page. So clicking this opens the global action window. And from here, you can quickly create events, so an event to log a call there, for example, tasks, calls and notes. And the idea is you can do this from anywhere you are in the system. You don't have to be on a record page in order to do that. If you just need to create a quick note, or you just need, you need to set up an event, you can just do that from whatever page you happen to be in. So hopefully a bit of a time saver there. So next up, the enhanced notes have some more enhancements, so they're double enhanced now. So they now support images, as you can see in this particular note, with a nice picture of our offices in there. And you can also, another interesting feature, you can go back to an earlier version of a note. So at the bottom of the note there, you'll see a drop-down button. So if you click that, that opens the version history dialog, which displays the available versions. And if I then click on an entry, that will then display a preview of the version, and I can then click on the restore button to revert the note back to that particular version. So if there have been some changes, you need to go back to an earlier version, it's quite easy now rather than having to remember what went in there. So some additional enhancements to the Lightning experience in this release. Custom buttons and links now support the content source of URL. So that means if you've got a custom button which should open a URL, that will now work. However, this doesn't, for those who've been using Salesforce for a little while and have been customizing it, this doesn't support URL hacks. So you can't pass parameters on that URL that will open a standard page and pre-fill information on it, because that isn't supported in the Lightning experience. It was never supported in Salesforce Classic anyway, but it was something that had worked for a number of years, so everyone was very comfortable using it. But in Lightning experience, they've been very clear they aren't going to support that. Formula fields, so they now support hyperlinks, which always open in a new tab, and they also support images, which appear in most places, but not in search results. And finally, community setup is now available in the Lightning experience, but communities themselves still either use the classic user interface, or if you're using the community builder, they'll use whichever template you've chosen for that. But communities themselves do not yet support the Lightning experience. The Environment Hub is now available, so for anyone working in the ISV space, you'll be able to manage your orgs through that. You can now change record ownership on work orders, which are the new object I spoke about earlier, and also campaigns, which have now got Lightning experience support. And finally, you can change ownership to a queue. So you can, in the Lightning experience, you can assign the following record types to a queue. So custom objects, leads, cases, and once again, work orders. You can find out more information at the following links. So as usual, don't worry about trying to capture these. We'll send out the slide deck after the webinar, so you've got access to them. So the first link tells you which of your existing customizations are supported by Lightning experience. The second link I'm finding really, really useful. So this is a comparison of the features available in each of Lightning, X, and Classic. It's quite a long list of information there, but it's really as a one-stop shop if you want to know what's going to work and what you can do and what you can't do. And the final link tells you what currently isn't supported in the Lightning experience. So that's the end of the Lightning experience. So next up, we've got some Service Cloud enhancements. So first up, a few new features for live agents. So agents can now transfer a chat to a button or a queue. So the transferred chat is added to the list of incoming chats for the agent based on its age. So if you transfer to someone, that doesn't mean it goes in at the bottom. That means it goes in at the appropriate place based on when that chat was started. So your customers don't get stuck at the bottom of a queue waiting for someone else to pick them up. They'll kind of jump nearer to the top of it. There's now separate options for transferring chats to agents, buttons, or skills. So originally there was one transfer option for this, which you had to enable for everyone or for no one, whereas now you can assign these individual permissions to your agents. We're just hearing the usual BrightGen's siren. Anyone who's attended any one of our webinars will be familiar with this. It's the luck of being just down the road from an ambulance station and a fire station. And finally, agents can keep people in the loop by including a private message when they initiate a transfer or a conference. So this is something which isn't displayed to the customer that you're talking to, but what it means is that customers don't have to repeat themselves to each agent. They get the context of what's actually happened. So if they've given their username and account number, you can pass that information on to the next agent rather than annoying them by asking them over and over again, as so many automated systems do. So next, some Omni Channel enhancements. So Omni Channel has a new push timeout feature, which requires setup via the routing configuration page. So this is a new feature to ensure that your customers aren't left hanging if an agent isn't in a position to accept or reject a new piece of work quickly. So if they're in mid-conversation, they're doing something, they can see that something has been assigned to them, but they can't actually break away that quickly. They might be a minute or two before they can come back and say, no, actually, I can't deal with this. So what you can do is you can configure a timeout, and after the configured number of seconds have elapsed without a response of any kind from the agent, the request will automatically be rerouted to another agent. And also off the back of this, you can optionally set the agent presence to unavailable by a setting in the presence configuration to ensure that they don't get past any more work until they've kind of updated their presence to say, I'm here and I'm available. So next up we have knowledge. So that has a few improvements this release. You can now define page layouts for a knowledge article on a per profile basis rather than the way it's been up to now, which was a single page layout for the whole organization. Note this is not used by the communication channel functionality. For those not familiar with communication channel, it allows you to insert article fields into a case email, and that continues to use its own bespoke communication channel mapping. Per profile page layouts are supported in Salesforce Classic only. And also Chatter Plus and Force.com licenses now support read-only access to knowledge articles. So if you've got users that require access, they can't author articles, but they can browse the knowledge base, then they'll be able to do that now once the Spring 16 release is live. You can now create validation rules on knowledge articles. A couple of things to bear in mind. If a validation rule throws an error, it'll always appear at the top of the page rather than against a particular field, which is something you can set up on validation rules for other objects. So you definitely want to make sure the error contains enough information to identify the field or fields in error. And also, probably not the greatest user experience, only the first error is displayed. So if there's a number of failures, whoever's authoring the knowledge article will go into a loop of fixing the error, resaving to be told the next error, which isn't necessarily the greatest user experience. So you might want to prepare people for that if you're going to use validation rules on knowledge articles. All fields that have validation rules must appear in a page layout. So if a user's profile is associated with a page layout where fields with validation rules do not appear, they will not be able to create or edit articles of that type. Okay, so that's the end of Service Cloud. Moving on to mobile changes, so Salesforce 1. So Salesforce 1 has some nice charting improvements in Spring 16. So as you can see here, there's a few screenshots of the charts. So this is the same charting library as the Lightning experience, which actually originated out of Wave a year or two ago. So much kind of more modern look and feel, much more clearer colours, etc. You can also tap on a chart to see brief details without having to drill down into the underlying data, which is quite nice. But you can still see the underlying data if you need to, just by tapping through. And you can also, quite a nice feature, you can change, in certain cases, you can change the particular chart on the fly as you're viewing it, and just click done. It will just update and give you the new chart type. So it'll only show you the chart types which are actually appropriate for that particular set of data. These enhanced charts display on phone devices only, so they won't appear on tablets and they won't appear on desktop if you're using Salesforce 1 in those ways, and they must be enabled by an administrator. They're not enabled by default. So some other Salesforce 1 enhancements. So much like the Lightning experience, custom buttons and links now support the URL target, although as I said before, this doesn't enable URL hacks. You can see images in notes and access previous versions of notes. Assets are now supported by the Salesforce 1 application. And finally, if users enter a search term that doesn't yield results, they will see results that match a corrected spelling of the term. So if you've ever seen this on Google, if you misspell something like Salesforce as Slazforce, it will say showing results for Salesforce. So you will see something similar to that. But this does only apply to knowledge articles, feeds, groups, files, and chatter questions. So it doesn't apply to most objects. And this is available in English only. So there is no spell check in other languages. So next up we have some enhancements to chatter and to files. Although they used to be very tightly coupled, they're not so much now, but they still dovetail with each other quite nicely, so we lump them together. Chatter first. You can now create up to 30,000 groups in one Salesforce org, which was 10,000. Each user can now join up to 300 groups, which used to be limited to 100. Users can now edit chatter posts containing files or links, whereas before you could edit chatter posts that didn't have those things in them. But if you wanted to edit posts with files or links, you had to either delete the post and recreate it or put a comment on explaining what you actually meant in your post. Neither a great solution. And finally, Chatter and Lightning Experience now supports groups that contain customers, as Salesforce Classic has for some considerable time now. So a Lightning Experience feature for Chatter is the ability to add banner images for groups and user profiles. So at the top of a group page, there is a small camera icon. So clicking this opens up the image upload dialog, which allows me to upload an image and then selection that will be used as a banner. So if I then click the save button, that takes me back to the group page, as you can hopefully just about see there. And probably not my finest piece of creativity there, but it will show you the group page with the new image, or the slice of the new image that I was able to select, displayed across the top of the page. So it just allows you to kind of brand your groups and user profiles a little bit more than you have been able to. Broadcast groups, so these are a special type of public, private or unlisted group, and the reason these are special is only group owners and managers can create posts. Group members can respond, but they can't create their own posts. So these are useful where information needs to be regularly shared with a large group of individuals, or where you want to keep the group discussions focused and relevant and not have people kind of just bring up their own discussions for things that may not be exactly what the purpose of the group is. And in Salesforce Classic, you can now monitor group activity via the group report. So this is accessible via a link on the group page, as you can see highlighted there in red, and it shows the number of members, posts, comments, likes, questions, and answered questions for that group for the particular time period. So it's very familiar be a very familiar report to anyone who's used Salesforce reporting. You can now create records directly in a group, even if the record can't be shared with the group. In this case, the record will be created, but it won't be shared with the group, and it won't appear in the group records list. I'm in two minds about whether this is really useful functionality or really confusing functionality, because sometimes you'll create a record and it will go in the group, and other times you'll create a record and it won't go in the group. But the idea of this is to allow you to quickly create a record really wherever you happen to be, rather than forcing you to jump out of the group in order to be able to do it. So in the Lightning experience, there's a new button that allows you to refresh the feed without refreshing the whole page. So if you see that and click it, that will just refresh the feed information beneath, rather than reloading the whole page. Only available for Lightning components, because that's for Lightning experience. So that's built using components, so it's very easy just to change that component underneath. And finally, for Chatter, you can choose whether a quick action posts to a feed or not. And you can create a custom message that displays when the action is successful, rather than leaving your users wondering what actually happened there. So as I was saying, files and Chatter used to be tightly coupled, but not so much, because files no longer require Chatter, apart from the Salesforce One downloadable applications. So that's the basically iOS or Android installed Salesforce One applications still need that. You can now share files and manage sharing in the Lightning experience, as well as Salesforce Classic, where you've been able to do it, obviously, from the word go. Google Docs now display a one-page preview in the Lightning experience previewer. Nothing in Salesforce Classic for that, I'm afraid. And finally, there's a there's a new access level for shared files, which is set by record. So with this level of sharing, when a user has access to the record, they also have access to a file. So starting with Spring 16, you can choose to store notes and attachments as files on a record, so as chatter files, rather than as the attachment object or the note object. This is for Salesforce Classic only, and you must enable this via an org preference, which is disabled by default. Take care, and I would advise be wary, and if you're one of our customers, I would advise talking to Clive before enabling this, because I know in the past we've written quite a lot of code for people that relies on being able to store files as attachments against a record. So if you have code that's doing that and you flip this over, then that won't work for any new attachments that you create. So next up, communities. So for anyone that's using community templates, there are new versions for Spring 16, and these are based on Lightning components. However, if you upgrade to these templates from a pre-Winter 16, so a pre-Lightning components version, you will lose any of the customizations that you have made. However, if you don't upgrade from a pre-Winter 16 version of the templates, the plan is that you will no longer be supported as of Summer 16. So they still work, but if you encounter a problem, you'll be on your own. So we're kind of in a period of about sort of 6 months or so, where you really need, if you're on a pre-Winter 16 template, then you really need to make a decision as to what you're going to do about those, whether you're going to upgrade right away, whether you're going to wait until Summer 16 until there's some improvements, etc. But something to be thinking about. There are new chatter Lightning components for Community Builder, including feed, publisher, and groups. The maximum number of communities that you can create is now 50 for all orgs. So this used to be org specific. And I think a lot of the time it used to depend on when you'd purchased your licenses for your communities. Now it's an across the board 50. Everybody gets it. Happy days. And finally, you can restrict the type and size of files that can be uploaded for your entire community. So note this means you have to specify the types of file that are allowed rather than the types of file that are blocked, which is unfortunate because if you only want to exclude one or two files, for example, if I just want to exclude PNG and JPEG files, so I don't want the images being uploaded, but I'm happy with everything else, I have to list however many other file formats I'm prepared to support, which does seem kind of a slightly odd way of doing it. I would have thought it would be much easier to just list those you're excluding, but hey ho, that's the way it works. You can now create community audiences for your recommendations, either through the UI for new members based on a number of days since registration, or using a custom list, but that's unfortunately through the UI only, through the API only at the moment. A customer community now supports up to 10 million members, which was 7 million. So if we've got any companies out there that's successful enough to have 10 million customers willing to, or ready and willing to interact with them on a community, then you can now support all of them, which is good news. Customer community licenses now have access to the notes and attachment field. Sorry, notes and attachments related to accounts and contacts. And something that I know that some of Clive's service customers have been waiting for a while. Role-based community users can now create and edit reports. Role-based means that high-volume licenses are excluded, so the type where you pay, I don't know, 50 pence per login per month. But the type of community that we have, where everyone is a named user and sits in a role hierarchy, if you're a user of our community, for example, you'll be able to create and edit your own reports rather than relying on us to create reports that you can view. Okay, and finally on communities, we have some changes around moderation. So moderation now applies to all field types, such as polls, links, and file names. And you can now display the blocked keywords in the moderation rule message, so users are left in no doubt as to why their post was blocked. And finally, you can translate moderation rule messages. Okay, so next up we have our final topic. I'm sure you'll all be pleased to hear, because this has been, as I say, there was quite a lot of interest to people here, so it's probably a slightly longer webinar than we usually do. The Salesforce platform. My favourite bit, I should also say. So the first change is the behaviour if you're deploying during a Salesforce service update, which is something we always try to avoid, and I know everyone tries to avoid it. Sometimes there's no alternative. Dates change, both on the side of projects and of Salesforce, and you often end up deploying the times when you really would prefer not to. So if a service update starts while your tests are running, the tests will be saved and they'll resume from the point they left off once the upgrade is complete, rather than as they used to, restarting from the beginning, because often tests, we've got orgs with tests that take over an hour, so that could be quite annoying to lose your tests partway through a deployment and have to rerun them all. But tests do run in blocks, and they'll resume from the start of blocks. So you may see a few tests being rerun, but you won't see all of your tests being rerun. So next up, we have some sandbox enhancements. So I think this is really good news myself. So there's more developer sandboxes basically based on your edition. So if you've got Enterprise Edition, you used to get 1 developer sandbox. You now get 25, so quite a significant increase. If you've got Unlimited Edition, you used to get 15, now you get 50. And if you've got Performance Edition, which I don't know of anyone that has, but if you have a Performance Edition, then you get 100 developer sandboxes up from 30. So clearly developer sandboxes have become much more straightforward for Salesforce to create. Another new feature, you can create an Apex class that implements the sandbox post copy interface. And you can specify that this is executed when the refresh completes. So example use cases for this would be maybe to configure custom settings appropriately, or to set up some standing data, some configuration data. So that happens automatically once the sandbox refresh is complete. The sandbox copy speed for full and partial copy sandboxes has been improved. There's nothing for you to do here. You should just see it refresh faster after Spring 16. And finally, you can monitor the progress of a sandbox refresh. So in the list of sandboxes, a status bar will be displayed for any sandboxes that are in the queue or are currently refreshing, and hovering over the progress bar will show the percentage completion. So it's not just a case of sitting, waiting, hoping that it finishes at some point in time. Okay, so we're now getting down to the developer changes, but fear not, there's only a couple of slides at this level for me and people like me. So for anyone writing unit tests, there's some really useful improvements to that, so it was important that everyone knew about these. So first off, you can change the created date of records created in unit tests, which if you've ever wanted to do that, you'll know is a really important feature. I'm not going to go into any more detail about that, but there's a short link to a blog post there that I've written that'll explain that in a lot more detail for those that wish to know more about this. You can now create test suites, either through the developer console or through the API, to group together tests that run together to verify a particular functional area. So what this means is, rather than having to run all tests or to run individual tests and remember which tests you want to run, if you're doing some work around your integration, for example, you could set up a test suite that has all your integration test classes in there and run those as a discrete unit of tests, rather than having to do lots of manual workarounds or accept you'll sit for an hour and wait until every test in the system is completed. So that should be quite a time saver. Another really nice feature is you can now set the platform up to automatically stop failing test runs. So basically you achieve this by configuring a failure threshold of the maximum number of tests that you'll allow to fail. And once this is exceeded, the test runs stop. So if I configure my test threshold for 5 tests and 6 tests fail, then when that 6th test fail, that will then stop the whole test. Even if I've got 1,000 more test classes to run, none of those will run. So synchronous tests will stop immediately, whereas asynchronous tests, which is most of the time how your tests will run, they'll be asynchronous. They will stop when the currently running tests are complete. So if you've got tests running in parallel, it'll wait till those all finish, but no new ones will be started. Few improvements to the data management tools. So there's a new version of Data Loader on its way that supports OAuth, so less storing of credentials on disks and things like that. The data import wizard that supports person accounts is being retired, the dedicated person account import wizard. So the new generic data import wizard supports person accounts and all the other objects. So it's basically a single stop place to go to upload your data. The data import wizard now supports campaign member status updates, which it didn't before. So obviously you need a file of campaign member ID and the status that you want to set it to. And finally, there's a recent import jobs section on the Wizard homepage, so you can actually look at what you've been doing in terms of data load. You just get some history rather than, as before, just a single email telling you that whether there was success or failure. Next up, we have some improvements to the process builder. So you can now reorder the criteria through drag and drop. Previously, you had to delete and redefine them, which was, as you can imagine, ounces of fun if you had quite a lot of changes to make. So much easier just to move things around now. New versions copy the name and description from the previous version for you. So again, saves you having to retype. It's only a couple of fields, but if you're doing a lot of these, then you can burn a lot of time doing that. You can hover over a truncated field name and see the full field name. So at times it could be quite difficult to see exactly what it was. You knew it was an opportunity, as you can see there, but you don't know actually what that field that you've chosen is. So that's a way of allowing you to see full details. You can now add mentions to a chatter message from the process builder via an @ symbol in the message, like you would in chatter. Previously, you had to specify those in a separate field. And finally, you can now send email alerts for activities, so tasks and events. A few security updates. So when you log in from a new device, you'll be required to verify your account even if the IP address you're logging in from has been seen before. And the idle timeout for pin-locked mobile applications, or the maximum timeout, has been increased to 240 minutes from 30 minutes. So I've put use with caution here, because basically if you leave your device unattended, and you don't have auto locking or home screen locking or anything like that, that means your application is at risk for up to 4 hours if you leave it unattended. So this may not be something that you particularly want. I'm guessing someone does because it's been put in there, but I'd certainly be asking questions as to why it needs to be that long. And our final slide, well done everyone for hanging on in there. I think this one's actually quite interesting, is the new Setup Healthcheck tool. So this is around security again. So what this shows you is how your security configuration measures up against the Salesforce baseline standard. So you can find out how the Salesforce standard is calculated from the from the link below the score. And clicking on that will open you the help article. And it explains, it's really bands of percentages, 33 to 66, that kind of thing. It'll give you an idea of what sort of things it's looking for. So specific risks appear lower down, broken up into high, medium, and low. There's also a useful time saver I'm quite pleased to see, which is every risk has a link to the setting to allow you to fix it. So it's all well and good telling people there's something wrong, but give them a quick way to fix it. I think is likely to see much better take up. So I'm quite pleased on it. I'm quite pleased to see this. I think it's a really good feature from the security perspective. Makes it really easy to see, if somebody has made a configuration change that's maybe had an impact on security. It's not down to you to go and keep checking things. You can push this information out. Okay, so well done everyone for hanging on in there. We're finally at the end. So as usual, as I always say, it's been a short overview of the release with a focus on the features that we think are of particular interest to our customers. There's much more information, including just the 390 odd pages of release notes at the short link shown here. So I'm about to take a well-earned drink of water. It sounds like Clive needs one.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm going to hand back over to Clive, and we'll start looking at some Q&A.